Last season, on Chosen Ones. Theo and Zairi appear in a dying world, the two attempting to enter Arthur's lab as our protagonists gear up to fight fallen Theo and the Plaguebringer. Brandy goes by the name of Wolf, and Flynn calls Shui a Bishu, confusing the Bard and Paladin even further. Despite Wolf's warning to stop pursuing them, Flynn continues to advance, causing the Tiefling to summon the Abagrim. Shui uses a spell to quickly escape with Flynn, while the Archfiend keeps watch from afar. In the ruins of a devastated village, Brandy and Arthur run into alternate versions of Shui and Vermona. The group decides to travel together when they realize they are headed to the same festival. They meet an alternate version of Theo, and eventually rendezvous with Vermona's family, which turns out to be the strange shoemaker and her daughter Rivera, before teleporting to the festival. At the event, Brandy encounters a rather ordinary Aviath, and sees a living Merlin being followed by the Darkborn Queen. When he tries to warn her, she recognizes him as the Plaguebringer and becomes suspicious. Shui and Vermona discuss the possibility of Dashi being an assassin, with Shui expressing his determination to protect the king. While sharing a room with Theo, Brandy hears a sound from Arthur's room. Upon investigating, he finds Arthur hunched over Merlin, whose spark has been ripped from her body. Arthur manages to put it back, but black veins appear on Merlin's neck, only receding after she drinks God's brandy. Brandy accuses Arthur of causing the black moss, leading to a tense standoff. Arthur tries to justify his actions by saying Merlin was going to turn the Tiefling in, but Brandy hardly finds this to be an acceptable response. Merlin clearly still holds hostility towards the once Plaguebringer and her grandson, and leaves after she has given God's brandy despite her magic being temporarily disabled. Brandy asks Arthur about Merlin's death, and he reveals that she is still alive in their timeline. Meanwhile, Zairi and Theo successfully enter the lab. Theo finds a bookshelf with books titled Argos and Merlin, and discovers a partially jabberfied Merlin in one of the containers after reading her book. She can't seem to remember anything, and after informing Zairi, they decide to look for God's brandy to see if they can help her. Back at the hotel, Brandy confronts Arthur about what he was doing before Zairi time traveled to stop him, and Arthur confesses that he was attempting to create a Chosen One. The High Elf explains that if a Chosen One has a strong enough spark, they could defeat Abaddon, and he thinks that Theo might have the potential to do so. He suggests locating the Black Heart as an alternative method to defeat Abaddon, but it's much riskier. During the festival, Shui spots the Darkborn Queen with Dashi tailing her, prompting him to confront his forgotten guardian. After learning that the king's supposed assassination is a cover-up for something bigger, he decides to follow Aelia to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, a group of bandits attacks King Larkspur, cutting the festivities short. Shui follows Aelia to the hotel, where she merges with the Chosen One and freezes Shui in place, leaving him alone with Vermona, his once trusted master. The merged Merlin approaches the king, but Brandy banishes them both to prevent their ritual from succeeding. With time running out, Arthur opens a portal, and the wizard and warlock disappear, leaving the timeline's fate unknown. As Brandy and Arthur move through the blank void referred to as the Binding Matter, they encounter a series of books holding the tales of countless individuals. Along the way, Brandy hears an unfamiliar voice that he cannot identify, but he is unable to investigate it further before they continue. In the subsequent timeline, they encounter alternate versions of their friends living surprisingly happy lives, Brandy and Theo even being engaged. Returning to the Binding Matter, Arthur is suddenly pulled into the black substance beneath them, dragging Brandy down with him and causing them to land in the Magic Man's study. Shui and Aviath, along with Flynn, find themselves teleported to the Prime Capital after narrowly escaping Wolf, Fallen Theo, and the Abagrim. Upon arrival, they are met by King Larkspur, who surprises Aviath by calling him his son. Aviath discovers an alternate version of Rue, with whom he has had a child in this timeline. Meanwhile, Flynn takes Shui to Abishu's temple. Both the Bard and Paladin become absorbed into their new lives, losing all memory of their original timeline.
After being trapped for 100 days, Theo decides to use a version of Zairi's spark to time travel. The lab loses power and Arthur suddenly teleports inside, but disappears before Theo can inform Zairi. Meanwhile, the Arthur traveling with Brandy finally gets to meet the Magic Man and learns that he was the main character in the last story. But the audience is getting bored and is threatening to end the show if a sequel doesn't start soon. The Magic Man gives Arthur a brand to distinguish between the two versions, and sends him and Brandy away with the knowledge that a new main character will be chosen soon. Brandy and Aviath finally reunite, with Brandy jogging the Asmer's memories before they quickly search for Shui to do the same. They decide to hide out at the festival until Arthur can open the bookmark at its peak. The next step is to retrieve Theo. Arthur and Brandy appear in a colorless world where the specklings on the stage seem to be swarming around Zairi, their eyes now blue. Arthur saves the half-elf from being killed, and the specklings transformed into winged creatures with beaks. Arthur and Brandy teleport into the lab where they reunite with Theo, and they manage to escape the newly transformed Specklings. They arrive back at the old compound to find the stage covered in snow, indicating that time has passed. Arthur then teleports the group to the new compound in Seoul, which is also covered in snow, despite it being located in the desert. Upon entering the compound, the group discovers that the alternate Arthur has spread false news of their demise, and has also constructed a peculiar blue building, which houses the demigod Marfire as well as Titus. Theo informs Brandy that his spark has been upgraded, and entrusts him with his fate seed, declaring that Brandy is his home. Shui joins Theo to visit Titus, making a brief stop at Marfire's room along the way. During their conversation with Marfire, it becomes clear that Libris has not been completely honest with Shui. Upon reaching Titus, they discuss his newly evolved spark from a safe distance, since it's deemed too risky to approach him. They discover that Titus has also encountered Abaddon during his spark evolution, leading Theo to realize that he was deceived in the lab when his own spark was upgraded. Brandy utilizes his footnotes ability to research both Theo and the audience. The latter results in a fresh set of red eye tattoos appearing on the palms of his hands. Following an encounter with Aviath, Brandy chooses to come clean about his past, delving into the specifics of his upbringing, his escape, and his eventual downfall, which culminated in his resurrection and discovery in Theo's barn. Brandy implores any higher power that may be listening to permit him to continue atoning for his past deeds, and he is greeted by a peculiar child with vivid crimson eyes. The child informs the warlock that he has progressed to Act 3. Aviath lends his support as Brandy takes the Oath of Redemption, hoping to confront and overcome his dark past and strive for a better future. Subsequently, with Arthur's assistance, the group plane shifts into the moon in search of Dashi. However, upon arriving, they discover that Dashi remains in butterfly form. Winona implores them to take her from the moon as well, but the group hesitates. In response, Winona causes Dashi to vanish and presents them with an ultimatum: rescue Dashi and release Winona, or leave both of them trapped in this mysterious plane.
Brandy first reaches out to Dara via sending, seeking answers as to why Winona is trapped in the moon. He then tries to contact Solari, who reveals that Dara is responsible for Winona's imprisonment, as she desires to keep the moon spirit for herself. During their conversation, Brandy confirms that Essence is merged with Solari. Winona summons Dashi again and tries to change her back, but she remains the size of a butterfly, with wings still intact. Eventually, the group convinces the moon spirit to let them take Dashi with them, and they hold hands as Arthur teleports them back to Absalom, leaving the rabbit behind once more in the moon. Shui rushes off with Dashi to the library and enters Estel's office to seek help. Estel agrees to take care of Dashi and shows Shui some pictures of his parents, which prompts him to inquire about being the god Ibishu. Estel dismisses this possibility, as Ibishu was created years ago by Mizuni and Verada to kill Winona. Shui's parents, on the other hand, were responsible for killing Ibishu, with Winona's guidance to prevent this from ever happening. Upon hearing this, Shui rushes away and summons Nather to go to the keep. He confronts Mizuni about being his mother, and she reveals that he is not her son in his current mortal state, but rather a god turned mortal. Estel is consulted by Aviath about the horn growing on his forehead. She offers to create something to halt the transformation, but informs him that in order to get rid of it completely, he would need help from the entity that blessed him to be an Aasimar to begin with, or from the Abigram, who cursed him to start turning into a tiefling. In the meantime, Arthur transports Brandy and Theo to Auntie Alice's farm, where they reunite with Theo's aunt and take some time to catch up and enjoy a moment of peace with his family. Estel informs Aviath that Peter had escaped some time ago and has been seen at the keep or at the edge of the forest. She also warns Aviath that Ilya's merges can become unstable over time, raising concerns about Peter's current state. In a private conversation with Alice, Brandy asks for her blessing to marry Thea. Shui talks with Dashi, discovering the full title of Ibishu is Ibishu, the cackling sea jester, also referred to as the serpent trapped in stars. Dashi informs him that his parents went to mirror depths before they vanished. Brandy uses his footnotes ability to learn more about Ibishu, but the dreadful story it reveals does little to ease Shui's worries. Brandy conducts an experiment using sending to contact Ibishu, and the group is surprised to discover that the voice that responds is the same one Shui hears from the Beast Blade. They go to Arthur's lab so that everyone can converse with the voice. When the blade is put into the machine, Shui has a memory surface in which he met a peculiar child he named Stormy many years ago.
Brandy discovers that Arthur doesn't need to breathe, eat, or sleep, which worries him about his own situation. He decides to speak with Titus next to test his theory, and also manages to get Arthur to give up the Magic Man's radio, providing him a more direct means of communication with his patron, while the rest of the group leaves the lab. Brandy and Theo stay behind to talk to Arthur. Brandy inquires as to why Abaddon took Aviath's surname, and Arthur explains that he admired Aviath because he was a great hero, despite never being a chosen one. The group then travels to the blue building where Titus is being held. Aviath is immediately on guard upon encountering the demigod Marfire, who is also contained in one of the cells. Both Arthur and Brandy are able to approach Titus without needing to breathe, confirming that there was something strange happening to the tiefling. After their visit to the blue building, the group meets up again. Brandy contacts Arthur using the sending spell and discovers that the wizard has made a breakthrough in his research and may be able to cure Merlin. At the wall, our protagonists finally meet up with Estel and the Abergrim for a long-awaited conversation. During their discussion, they uncover some disturbing revelations about the state of the world. The Darkborn Queen, Aelia, and King Larkspur, who is actually Lemony, are fabricating a war in order to obtain resources and funding. Lemony is currently using a puppet because they lost their body while crossing over from the last universe. They plan to acquire Aviath's body, who is an Asmer of Lemony, as a replacement. The Abergrim, on the other hand, is assembling an army of jabbers that he resurrected from pale tieflings. Brandy discovers that the other half of his sword is in the Prime Capital, and that he is able to wield it because his parents were elves. Vermona now possesses the new sword that the Abergrim had tried to give Brandy earlier. The Abergrim suggests turning Brandy into his first Asmer, a transformation that will take 1 month to complete, and the tiefling accepts the offer. Brandy has a nightmare where the world vanishes again as Abaddon destroys a strange book with the name Logan Wolf on it. Meanwhile, Aviath and Shui visit Essence and discover that she has been taken over by Solari, the sun goddess with whom she had merged. They realize that Essence's body is unable to handle the immense power, and she is slowly burning up with no clear sign how to stop it. Using his footnotes ability, Brandy obtains a cryptic message about the Magic Man, implying that the entertainer is having difficulty maintaining the show. Brandy then shows Theo the audience eyes that have appeared on his hands. Theo recalls his golem training and the eye creature that once taunted him. When they mention the binding matter, both Brandy and Theo feel something pulling at their minds, which they manage to resist. Brandy remembers Arthur's warning not to mention the binding when outside of it. The tiefling shares his experience of the library within the binding, and Theo brings up Merlin's book that he discovered in Arthur's laboratory. Shui awakens inside the moon and reunites with Winona, who remembers him despite not recalling their previous encounters. Shui requests that she unsheath the beast blade, and she complies. However, Shui blacks out shortly after and finds his weapon aimed at Winona's chest, barely avoiding fulfilling his destiny of killing the goddess.
In an attempt to uncover the truth behind his footnotes ability, Brandy visits Arthur's lab. There, the High Elf explains the side effects he's been experiencing. Arthur is merging with his alternate self the closer he gets to Abaddon. Arthur turns off Brandy's spark, but the tiefling is still able to summon the spectral book, suggesting he may be merged with something. They then enter the binding matter, where Brandy tries and fails to use his footnotes ability. However, the fact that he can summon the book at all leads him to believe his theory about being merged with the binding may be true. Later, the group reunites at the stage, where Arthur appears with Merlin, who is suffering from memory loss due to her time as a jabber. They teleport away, hoping to find some respite from the chaos at the hot springs. Upon arriving at the mountain resort, Aviath's parents, Warwick and Malia, welcomed the group. Their couple took over the business as people sought refuge in the mountains to escape the jabbers. After getting their cabins assigned to them, the group meets Miffy, an employee who bears a striking resemblance to Essence. Aviath, Shui, and Brandy visit the sauna, where Brandy reveals his intentions to propose to Theo. Meanwhile, Theo gets a haircut from Malia and expresses his frustrations with how he's been coping with all the recent changes. No episode 28 recap. Aviath goes and gets a haircut of his own, and discovers that his parents have taken the king's surname. When the offer is presented to him to change his own last name to Larkspur, he promptly declines. No episode 30 recap. Arthur and Aviath have a heart-to-heart conversation in front of the caves. He tells Aviath that he can become something great without relying on the title of Chosen One, and the Asmer finally learns that he is destined to never become one. The group spends the next day ice skating, and Merlin appears to have regained her memories after tripping Brandy. Miffy approaches the cabins where Brandy and Theo are staying, and pulls Brandy aside, giving him 2 rings that were found in front of the now fully bloomed roses. No episode 32 recap. The only noticeable thing was John. Yeah, dude. The group reconvenes for dinner and learns more about Miffy's spark, which allows him to locate anything he has previously seen, even if it was an illusion. During their cave tour, Miffy shows them the mesmerizing display of glowing algae on the walls that depicts the story of the gods and their metamorphoses. However, Miffy's true motive for bringing them here is to assist Claytor, the god he is an asthma of. He leads them to a massive cluster of crystals that gradually separate to unveil the figure of the missing deity. Upon conversing with Claytor, group discovers that the god has been dormant in the mountains after someone who sounds suspiciously like Vermona injured him several centuries ago. He refuses to leave the cave and demands that they don't bring anyone to his location, as it could put him at risk in his weakened state. Upon their return to the resort, the group goes to their respective cabins for some rest. Brandy casts Dream on Theo, showing him a stunning display of their life together thus far, and culminating in the long-awaited proposal. Theo awakens to his fiancée and friends eagerly ready to celebrate their engagement. After spending a few hours together, the group retires to their cabins. However, Brandy is summoned to the entrance of the cave by Arthur, where he discovers that it was actually Abaddon who requested the meeting. When asked what he wants, Brandy replies to fix things, and Abaddon vanishes, his threats to destroy what the tiefling holds dear hanging in the air.
Morning soon, the light dims fast here. Should we go outside again one more day, my dear? Why don't we just stay as the familiar fades away? Things are the same day by day. What are you waiting for, darling? What are you running from, stranger? Where are you hiding now? Don't you waste this chance. Do we have time for this, dear friend? How could we ever run out now? All that we have is this moment. Let's make time. For the end of this story, time for the start of our new life, time for us all to come back for fate's last encore, where we find out what this all means. It means a lot that you're here now. Let's make the most of this, shall we? We have time.